Nerdcast assemble!
Stay dandy, baby.
Wedding bells are ringing in another exciting episode of The God of High School, an episode which trades up its action for a deep dive into some character development. I already know that there's some people who are going to watch this episode and they're probably not going to care for it, considering that the last couple of episodes have given us nothing but pure, raw, epic action. In fact, I believe it was Chibi Reviews who basically said that The God of High School is essentially the Dragon Ball of webtoons, and my good friend, I agree with you. That's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what it feels like. But I am really glad that this episode finally decided to start delving into the relationship of the three main characters. And most of this episode was actually a focus on the character of Mira, who amongst all the main characters is unique. Not just for the fact that she's female, but for the fact that her fighting style involves using a sword. But this is an episode that I could not have possibly predicted, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So the episode actually opens up with those weird, freaky, super attractive nurses who are giving us sort of the skinny on what's going to be happening in the big final preliminaries of the God of High School tournament, and we get to see who our final four fighters are going to be. Of course, three of them are going to be the main characters of the series, Mori, Mira, and Daewoo, but there's going to be a fourth mysterious fighter, some guy who uses like a version of Brazilian martial arts. He goes by the name of Beyond, and he's actually going to be battling against Mori, which of course means that Mira and Daewoo are going to be having an intense fight. And I really thought that this entire episode was going to be dedicated solely to that, but we actually do get to see their fight at the very end of this episode, and it's shocking to say the least. But before we even get to that, this entire episode mostly delves into the backstory of Mira, how she was taken up by her uncle after the death of her father, and how she's been desperately trying to pass on her family's sword fighting style. Now, it all actually opens up when she's hanging out with Mori and Daewoo on the street, when suddenly this guy in this hotshot vehicle shows up. He jumps out of his car, and he basically just immediately proposes to Mira. He wants to marry her, and predictably, of course, they freak out over this prospect. Now, you would think that, of course, Mira would immediately say no to this, but here's the thing. This guy that actually proposes is this big hotshot within this world. He's a renowned martial artist, he's a big superstar, and he has a lot of pull in the world, which means, of course, he'd be a great way to expose Mira's family's fighting style to the world. So she actually sees this as a pretty good opportunity in order to sort of honor her father's wishes. Of course, you can see she's a little uncomfortable over the prospect, considering that this guy is clearly older and she's just in high school, but still, there's potential here for her to finally find someone who could help her in spreading the fighting style of her family, so she's going to reluctantly sort of go along with the plan. All of this doesn't really sit too well with her uncle, and speaking of which, he's a character they introduce a little bit in this episode because we go back to a scene when she was a younger girl when her father passed away, and this is where we learn that her uncle essentially took her in and raised her and continued to train her in the way of the sword. We're also introduced to her super adorable cousin who's really excited over the prospect of a wedding and really just wants to help her find a dress and is really just gushing over the fact that she's about to marry this big wealthy guy who goes by the name of Sung Jin. It's also worth mentioning that Mori does not like any of this at all. He really knows what's going on with Mira here. He knows what she's trying to do, but he's kind of against the idea altogether. He realizes that there's a lot more to her fighting style than just trying to pass it on to another generation. He realizes that she has the skill to use it personally and should bring it into battle whenever necessary. She needs to basically embrace it herself and not try to find someone who could potentially use it better because she's already really freaking good at it. He tries to communicate this a number of different ways throughout the episode, but of course this doesn't really end up working for him. And then before you know it, boom, lickety-split, we're at a freaking wedding. And Mira, she cleans up pretty nice as a bride. It's amazing how completely different she looks when she's actually in the dress and not wearing her glasses. She practically looks like another character. But here's the thing. This is where we get the big twist of the episode, and I'm going to go ahead and throw up that spoiler warning right now if you have not watched the episode. Ready, steady, here we go. So, obviously, there is always something sort of weird about the character of Sung Jin. He comes across as, frankly, just a really haughty douchebag, but we actually get to learn that he's a part of that weird, creepy cultist organization, and the only reason that he's involved with Mira at all is because he wants to take her sword away, which has some sort of crazy, supernatural, godlike power. We don't know what that is, but clearly it's important to these people, so they really want it. He doesn't really want to be with Mira at all, despite the fact that he's kind of making making it seem that way. He simply is just taking advantage of her to take this weapon away from her. Of course, Mori realizes what's going on here, and he decides to crash the wedding, both him and Daewoo, freaking Graduate style, if the Graduate was mixed with Fists of Fury. Daewoo really shines here. He absolutely beats the shit out of these guards, as he claims he's simply just pushing them over, but he pretty much just wrecks their shit. So Mori and Daewoo crash the wedding, and that's when we get this big crazy scene where Mori decides to confront Mira, letting her know that she doesn't have to give herself away. She doesn't have to just give that fighting style to anyone. She herself is proficient at it enough, and she can master it just fine. Sungjin, of course, gets really pissed off and decides to attack with a freaking sword, and that's when suddenly he reveals that he also has a similar ability to what we saw in the last episode. When the commissioner summoned that weird crazy jester monster, Sungjin can summon some sort of weird demonic looking samurai dude, which brings the whole freaking house down, by the way. But Mira decides to jump in, and she ends up just slapping the absolute shit out of him using a martial arts technique where she runs her hand along his blade, basically just jacking him right in the jaw, and whew, did that feel good. So basically the episode ends with Mira realizing her mistakes and not having to worry about trying to find an heir for this fighting style, and realizing that she's good enough to actually pull it off. It's great because, one, she learned a little bit about herself, but also her friends who are willing to step in and do something to help her out. And that's what makes the final couple minutes of the episode all the more devastating, because it all ends on a really high note, and it gets you really excited to see what this big battle is going to be all about. It is also worth mentioning that in this conflict with Sungjin, she actually does end up getting her stomach cut by a sword, so she does get injured a little bit. I bring that up because I want to talk about the next scene. So, at the very end, out of nowhere, after the entire episode works its ass off to try and make you feel awesome, suddenly we go to a scene of Daewoo, who is seeing his friend in the hospital, and things are not looking good. It looks like he's, starting to fade, he's starting to die, and this really affects Daewoo. You can tell that while he comes across as a very stoic and super calm and collected kind of character, he's a guy who has a really big heart, and you can see that this has affected him in such a devastating manner as his personality goes through a massive shift. We actually get a scene where he's at work and he's accosted by those douchebags yet again, and I don't know what it is about bullies in anime, but they are the worst freaking people on the planet, and basically they start to make fun of him and the fact that his friend is about to die. Daewoo appropriately just ends up beating the crap out of them, to the point where his hands are covered in blood. And then immediately, we hard cut to the next day where the tournament has began. Mori, of course, is running late, and he runs in and sees that the fight is already underway, and it's an absolute massacre. Daewoo is just lacing into Mira. Not only does she not have her sword anymore because Sungjin decided to escape with it, and she was sort of okay with that because she doesn't need a sword to fight. No, maybe she could have used that sword here, because Daewoo is so upset over what's happening to his friend that essentially he has just turned into this berserker and going in an absolute rage, attacking her and actually punching her where she got cut by Sungjin, causing her to bleed out in the ring as he desperately tries to attack her like a wild animal. The episode ends, and it is devastating. That's really the only way to put it. There is one final scene after the post-credit scene, which is very bittersweet when compared to the actual ending, where you get to see Mira leaving the wedding reception with Mori and Daewoo as she takes a selfie with her brand new friends. It's an exact juxtaposition to the true end of the episode, which, like I said, is just beyond bittersweet. So, what's the rundown on this episode of The God of High School? This was another really fantastic episode of the series, which shows that it can do its characterization and its story just as well as its action, which is no doubt a highlight of the series, but this is an episode that made me realize I'm starting to care about these characters quite a bit. I mean, just the scene, I think, towards the end of the episode where Mira was realizing what Mori was trying to say, where she could do things her very own way. She doesn't simply have to go down this road of having to pass off this weapon, and she can honor her father by doing her own thing. The flashback sequence of her and her father training on a hill when she was a little girl, that almost brought a tear to my eye. It was done so perfectly. And then the scene with Daewoo, that was just so heartbreaking seeing that happen. You could see the devastation in his eyes, that he's lost everything, that everything he's been working hard for, working multiple jobs and trying to make it through this tournament just to save his friends, might not mean anything if he actually does end up dying. And it throws him into this rage that I didn't think that we could actually see from the character. He came across as this very, just very calm character, and here seeing him just go nuts, it was really heartbreaking to see personally. But again, this entire episode right here, while it did almost at first seem kind of fillerish, it was actually very important, especially with the introduction of the character of Soon Jin, who again is a part of that cultist organization. They're painting them as kind of like the main villains of the show, and it looks like they're going to be infiltrating a lot of the various storylines as the series goes on, and I can't wait to see what else their plan is, how they're going to be going up against everyone. Like, I'm still really confused about what's really going on in the background of the series outside of the actual tournament, and it's very clear that they're trying to keep a lot of these details vague, but it's got me really interested in all of it. But this was a really strong episode for the introduction of Mira's backstory. It's simple, but it's really effective for a show like this, and I have a feeling there's probably going to be a lot more to it as the actual series goes on, but I really cannot wait to see how this entire tournament is going to go down, because of course, we have that Brazilian fighter who's coming in. Mori is almost certainly going to defeat him unless the show just wants to subvert my expectations in the craziest way possible. But basically, they let you know in this episode that the finals are going to be Mori versus Daewoo. So things are going to get really intense here, and they're actually getting personal now. That's the thing. Before, it was just like a battle of friends. Like before, if it was just all of them going into the tournament at the end and having a good fight, you could see that there would be this camaraderie about it, where there would be some excitement and some respect amongst one another. Mori seeing what Daewoo did to Mira at the very end of the episode has probably only angered him even more, which means this is definitely going to be the craziest fight, I think, so far of the season. Before that, though, I'm interested to see what this Brazilian fighter is going to be about, and hopefully it gives us really something interesting to look at. I'm guessing maybe we'll see that in the next episode. Then maybe they'll take like a small break before we move on to the big final battle of this competition. Because I'd like another episode like this, believe it or not. I'd like to dive a little bit more into Daewoo's backstory of how he met his friend and why he means so much to him, and maybe even Mori just a little bit more. Maybe spend some time with both of these characters, and of course getting to see how Mira is going to survive this battle, because she got really hurt in that big fight. I knew that her getting cut by Sungjin was going to affect her. I just didn't expect that there would be the twist with Daewoo turning into some sort of destructive monster, wanting to actually go for a weakness like that. It's very not like his character in the way that it's been portrayed in the first couple of episodes. So, yeah, this was just a roller coaster of emotions type of episode, but still carrying a lot of that classic energy, and still continues to be my favorite anime of the season. So, I loved this episode right here. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was incredibly solid, but I'd love to get your thoughts about it, and you can sound off in the comment section below telling me what you thought about this episode of The God of High School. Did you like all this episode? Did you like all the backstory with Mira in this episode? What about the character of Sungjin? What is their plan to collect this weapon and maybe even go up against the other commissioners of the tournament? Are they working with them? Are they a separate entity altogether? And what about that big final fight with Mira and Daewoo? Was that as devastating for you as it was for me? And what do you hope to see from the big final of the preliminary battles of the God of High School tournament? Let's talk about all that stuff and this episode in the comment section below. So there it is, my friends. Thank you for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. If you did like this video, make a fist, punch that like button. Helps out these videos tremendously. I would also like to go ahead and thank all of my patrons who've been checking out my Patreon page. A lot of you guys have been making some very generous donations, and I cannot thank you enough for that. You've also been giving me some great feedback on all of my videos. And remember, if you do make a small donation to my Patreon, I will review an anime series of your choice, and I would love to add your name to this list of amazing people who are helping to support this channel. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'll see you all next time. And as always, stay down there, baby.